Welcome to another episode of the Margin Max Minute. I'm Paul Ayers, your business coach, and I am thrilled to be able to use this Margin Max Minute on a weekly basis to build our Fit Professional One community. Thank you for joining us again today. We are already on number 8 of 10 strategies to reduce costs and therefore increase your margins. And today we're going to talk about the idea of outsourcing key functions. This is not new to us. In fact, over time, it's quite likely in your small business, there's some piece of your business that you outsource. For instance, tax time is right now in early April, and most of us use a good tax accountant to pull that together for us. But there's many others I want to talk about today. I also want to touch base on the fact that sometimes outsourcing can actually cause issues that might impact the viability of our business and our margins going forward. Okay, so let's start with a good definition of just what outsourcing is. Outsourcing of non-core functions refers to the practice of delegating certain tasks or certain activities that are not central to your primary business objectives and to getting those out to third-party providers. Generally, this strategy will allow businesses to focus on their core resources and efforts while leveraging specialized expertise and cost efficiencies from those external vendors to handle non-essential functions and therefore keeping costs down. So next, what we'd like to do is get you a nice checklist of items that you might consider for outsourcing. First, let's start with manufacturing support services. In this particular category, we might have maintenance and repair of our equipment, retooling. We may have actual repair of machinery. We may have fabrication services or welding services. Another real typical one is logistics and distribution. I think most of us have experienced this just because of the expense and expertise it takes to keep a large truck fleet, for instance, available. So in the area of logistics and distribution, additionally, we might consider outsourcing our warehousing functions, our transportation functions, and our inventory management, especially when we have intermodal transportation, which might include shipping overseas or railroads. The next one is IT support and IT services. This includes network management, cybersecurity, and software development. After all, it's very, very difficult to employ programmers, if you will, for small businesses. Also, the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning, how to create those data collection services, that might drive a whole nother avenue that we could consider for outsourcing rather than building that expertise inside. Essentially, build it, train it, get it functional, then be able to turn off the switch for those expenses involved in those very complex cyber and IT functions. The next one is customer support operations. This can include services by outsourced call centers to handle customer complaints, customer inquiries, and various support services. What this does is allows 24/7 access, and certainly if it's 24/7 access, and certainly if it's well trained, provides the opportunity to improve our service in the eyes of the customer. Another basic area is, of course, the aforementioned accounting and bookkeeping. Some of these include payroll, tax preparation, financial reporting, and also various data collection services. And the last one we'll talk about today is marketing and advertising. Certainly, those are two separate things in and of themselves, but in this new world, we have digital marketing, social media management, advertising campaigns, and content generation, just to name a few. We have to do this in order to keep our brand presence active and alive and get to the places where the customers are actually spending their time. Like they say, where are the eyeballs? You want to get in front of those. All right, those are some of the areas that we might consider outsourcing. There's many, many more. First, I want to talk about the disadvantages of outsourcing and then end with some advantages of outsourcing. So really today, I want to talk about 5 basic disadvantages, and I'll go into each one a little bit. That list is loss of control, communication challenges, risk of dependency, hidden costs that might develop, and the potential loss of competitive advantage. So first of all, let's talk about loss of control. What's really interesting here is this can lead to issues such as quality concerns, communication gaps, and difficulty enforcing standards or getting your employees trained in a way that you have the ability to actually bring that function back in. That's a key point today in all of this, is that you really want to be able to determine whether or not you're going to want to bring your outsourcing back into your company. And this is important. As you grow, as you scale, you indeed might be able to do payroll better than your vendor. And once you're there, why do you want to pay a markup to a vendor when you can actually do it efficiently internally and get it done? So that's a really key point, is all of these, you want to consider them temporary and consider the time when you might bring them back in as part of your plan. And certainly that will help mitigate that loss of control concern. The next one is communication challenges. Oh my goodness, language barriers and dialect barriers, simple communication, being able to understand, especially between your customers and any support services that you might have outsourced. We all have had that experience where we may have been on the phone with a foreign employee that is just plain difficult to understand, or the actual communication gets lost in the translation, or there's lack of flexibility or understanding, and we as a customer feel like we're spending an exorbitant amount of time getting something very simply done. Another one is risk of dependency. The problem here is if you don't always be considering the ability to bring this back in, various changes in technology can make you vulnerable to disruptions in the marketplace going forward, such as that supplier fails or goes out of business, legal fees, and transitioning between vendors. All those kind of things can really add up to a lot of burden, especially when you're not comfortable with the criteria you're going to need to select that next vendor. So you do have to pay attention to what you outsource. The next one is hidden costs. These can include expenses related to contract management, legal fees, transitioning between vendors, and maintaining oversight and quality assurance processes. Now, we certainly have touched on that already, but what happens is we can actually create more work if we're not careful in outsourcing because of the quality assurance we have to do to make sure we're getting what we've actually outsourced. And the last one I think is really, really important, and that's the potential loss of competitive advantage. There are so many different writings out there that you can look up if you want. Contact me if you want some to reference. But many companies start to gradually outsource their competitive advantage, and they don't really actually understand it. For instance, it could be that your customer service department is better than certain vendors at arranging and negotiating and following through on shipping your products to a particular destination. It could be. And sometimes until you outsource that, you don't understand just how good you were at that. And some of those hidden costs show up and really start to create an issue where your customers have more hassle and more time involved in what you're being able to do. Certainly some of the things we do are very tempting as small businesses because we take a look at breaking down our processes and thinking, boy, this particular part of my process is pretty routine and I should be able to find a vendor to be able to take care of that for me, maybe quicker, maybe shorten my lead time, and maybe at lower cost. What essentially happens when you do that is you could, besides the dependency factor, actually create a circumstance where the advantage that you had actually teaches that vendor how to do their job better. This is really common in enterprise-wide planning systems and different massive computing systems that are becoming very popular today. You have to be careful because that programming company, when they find a process that you're very good at, if you don't have a solid legal work for hire agreement, they might take that particular bit of the process, incorporate that into their offering, and sell it to the rest of the market. Now, unintentionally, it is possible you've just given away a piece of your competitive advantage, which starts to even the playing field. And we all know what that means. When the playing field doesn't have any differentiation, one of the only ways we can sell is on price. And in that world, we end up squeezing our margins and really having a lot of trouble keeping going. All right, so wow, why should we do this? Let's go positive here. I want to end on a positive note today. And outsourcing is so important. And we are after cost reduction strategies we are after making sure we utilize our resources to their maximum potential. So the cost efficiency that we get by sending out non-essential functions lets us streamline processes, lets us embrace technology and incorporate technology, and lets us utilize resources that we do have dedicated to solely performing those tasks that lead to cost savings for us, which ultimately leads to utility and cost savings for the vendor. The other thing is we get labor savings. There's nothing worse than underutilized employees. And this is what happens when we have part of a job. And what's typical for small businesses, what's really typical a lot of times is we will start to pile on a job in order to justify a 40 or 50-hour work week. And what we end up with is maybe someone who doesn't have the ability, because of the way we structured the job, to focus on efficiencies and therefore switching time. You know, when you have an employee going from one task to another, the typical switching time for them to get completely into the next task and get very good at it is about 20 minutes. So let's say you've piled on 4 different tasks that an employee has to do rather than outsourcing them because you can't justify an employee full time. Well, what you've done is actually added up to 80 minutes in that day in just switching costs that are preventing that employee from being top-notch and very efficient in those particular tasks. This might be a place that you look out at to outsource. So another one that's so key to small businesses is when we outsource various tasks, we reduce overhead. We want to get on a variable cost basis to the extent we can. In other words, use resources only when we need them. Outsourcing really does help us. And for most of we small businesses, things like tax preparation and outsourcing are actually great spots where we can save a lot of money, get full utilization, even though we're paying somebody else's markup. And the last one I want to talk about today is flexibility in cost structure. This is when I was talking about bringing certain tasks in and out as you grow, but also being able to respond to our market and our customer demands. If a customer, for instance, wants a feature that they haven't wanted before, rather than piling on, take a look at your operation and see what you can outsource so the people inside that really understand you as an operator and your customers' needs can go about working on that feature so it maintains your ability to have superior competitive advantages in your offering. And the other thing that might happen is during periods of uncertain economic times. You know, we all want to diversify our offerings, but if you can take something and outsource it and create the procedure and the mindset so that it's temporary, so you can bring it back in as you grow or as your market conditions allow, this actually is a potential competitive advantage in and of itself. So I have a couple of ideas in closing I'd like to leave you with. The first one is we talk about outsourcing non-essential ideas. So how do we determine non-essential in the functionality of everything we do in a business? And here's a couple of ideas that you can actually think of. First, do your customers care if you do it? This is very important. That is not necessarily a fail-safe, but it's a good indication you might be able to outsource it. The next one is, do you need to do that to ensure quality standard, both quantitatively and qualitatively, for your customer utilization of your product or service offering? Next, do you need to manipulate something or an item or an activity to a particular standard? And the last one on this one is the item or activity central to your differentiation. Next, I'd like to talk about how do we know what our competitive advantages are? And I really think this is pretty hard. I don't think it's necessarily straightforward. For any of you out there that are struggling with this, go to your founding member. Go to your founding story and take a look at the activities, the products, the services that actually were at that inflection point when that business started to pick up and gain more sales and serve more customers. Take a look at that very closely and you'll be able to identify very much what sets you apart. That is your inflection points in your sales. Same thing on the way down. What were the items or offerings either done or not done that caused that inflection point? So again, to know what your competitive advantages are, take a look why your customers buy from you. Talk to your tenured team members. Talk to your customer recovery teams and take a look at your customer complaints, actually, and take a look at what would prevent them from happening again. Look at your founding story and the inflection points from that point in time. And lastly, I want to leave you with a thought about how important it is to make sure that when we're taking a look at outsourcing, we don't self-commoditize our business. Please take a look at what you believe really creates margin, not only for you, but for your customers. Why do your customers buy from you? I think that's so important. With that, I'm here as a business coach. If I can help you, contact me at my website, thefitprofessional1.com. Sign up for a no-charge consult, and let's get to work.